EWC has come to an end, and that means it's time for people like me to give you our opinions on professional Counter-Strike players, even though I will never be good enough to be one of them. Someone new, I just wanted to try out. Basically, I'm going to go through the tournament, talk about some of the teams, the most important matchups, and such like that, and just give my ideas. It's not going to be super in-depth. I'm not going to do any round or game specific scenarios. I'm just gonna go off of what I wrote down, what I remember. And yeah, talk about the tournament. So I want to start with this little team right here, Team Complexity. Complexity was supposed to be the powerhouse coming out of the NA region, honestly the Americas region, with Furia's not so good performances prior to this tournament in last season. Um, However, Complexity did not really show up. They started their tournament with a 2-0 loss against Virtus Pro. This matchup was expected to be pretty 50-50. They're both teams are on pretty balanced playing fields, especially with the new addition of Electronic with the Team Soul. Virtus Pro still trying to figure out their identity. They're trying to be a little bit more aggressive, a little less passive, switching over to that Electronic play style instead of James Foley. Obviously, James is still doing a lot, but they're trying to balance everything out. And this game, you know, it's not an unexpected loss, but it's probably not the loss that people were looking for. The first map on Anubis, I'm pretty sure it was 6-6 going into halftime. Both teams looked pretty decent. Virtus Pro was able to just run away with it, though. I think they went 7 straight or 6 straight to close out the map. Um, Dust 2 game, Dust 2 wasn't too good. I think JT and Elige both had pretty good games on Dust 2, but overall, throughout the series, no one on Complexity really showed up except for JT. Props to him. He's actually been showing pretty good individual performances as of late, being the IGL. He's always known for those little random clutch rounds. But yeah, this matchup wasn't anything too special, too exciting, or groundbreaking to see them lose. However, the game that was a little bit of groundbreaking to see them lose was the matchup against M80. M80 going through a roster change, you know, shouldn't have been able to perform much at this tournament, but Complexity did kind of shit the bed, not gonna lie. I believe they were up 11-5 on Anubis, and they were on CT side for the second half when they had the lead, and they ended up blowing their lead really bad. I think M80 got like 6 in a row until Complexity was able to answer with a round back and send it to overtime. But it was good team play out of M80. Lake being the star player of that game, he was like 10 positive. The rest of the team were negative, not super bad. Like no one stuck out as a super bad performance, but Lake definitely put on the team on his shoulders for a little bit there, and Complexity clearly just had some miscommunications or maybe temperament issues in the team. One round specifically that I remember was I believe Grim was fighting Lake outside of B main. Grim was towards Plat on the back of B site, and Lake was fighting by the main door. And then Elige came running in through ruins or temple, whatever you want to call it, and was ready to help Grim out, but Lake had already gone to Pizza, and I guess that was never communicated because once Elige peeked out of the doorway, got shot in the side of the head, and he was not super happy. And Grim also died. Bomb side was wide open. It was a lot of little things like that where it just seemed like the team wasn't communicating well to each other or just didn't have the chemistry going into that matchup. And M80 were able to capitalize on that, which M80 going to their team now had a very decent tournament for what was expected of them. I believe they had 5 days of practice before this tournament with Lake, obviously losing Malbs, which is a huge hit to the team, but they had they had a pretty good performance, all things considered, being an underdog team. Their first matchup was versus Vitality. Uh, Map 1 Vertigo was so much fun to watch. It was super back and forth. Vitality having the lead for most of the game. I think M80 was able to pull ahead like 11-10. They got the lead, but obviously they would succumb to Team Vitality But overall, the series was great. Lake's first game in the real pro scene. Obviously he's been around in Challenger League, but this is his first big time LAN, big time event. He looked a bit timid this first map. Probably a little bit of nerves got to him, but he did knife Zywoo, so that's huge. Come on, that's huge. Well, like seriousness, they had a good fight against Vertigo. They could have won it, they could have lost it. Dust 2 game, however, was a little bit more rough for them. Obviously, going to Dust 2 as an underdog team against, one of the best teams in the world that have some of the best aimers in the world and one of the best IGLs in the world, it's going to be a little rough. Even though Vitality were struggling a little bit this tournament, you still, against a team like M80, Vitality's going to take them fucking every day. We already talked about their complexity series. Great showing again out of Lake. Plus 10. Kid was having a great time. And the series versus Mongol, Ancient 13-8. It it was a game. It wasn't anything too impressive out of either side, really. Um, looking at, come on. There we go. Looking at the map stats, I mean, fucking Jesus Christ. Blitz and Senzu went crazy, dog. Yeah, it was a back and forth affair in the first half, and then second half, Mongols were able to just kind of run away with it. Um, Nothing too surprising. Mongols were one of the teams that were expected to go, if not straight into playoffs, it definitely through the lower bracket to the playoffs. But you know, for the first tournament out of a team from NA that wasn't expected to do much, it's a good showing, and I predict there will be some sort of Ewing effect that comes out of this team. Basically, the Ewing effect is when a team loses their star player, each player on that team will sort of pick up where the gaps from where the star player left. So each player will be responsible for a little bit more, but it might be able to involve a little bit more cohesion throughout the whole team, and it ends up with them being better. Not saying M80 is going to be, top 10 team coming this season, but I do think they will be just as good, if not maybe even a little bit better than they were when they had Malbs. Next, we're going to talk about the Mongols, who going into this tournament, they were expected to make playoffs, whether that be winning this first round matchup against G2 or going through the lower bracket to make the playoffs. I feel like they were a team that everyone was expecting to hit top 8. Um, their first matchup against G2, I won't go too much into the G2 side of that because I want to cover them later on in the video, but you know, it was two close series. You don't really know what to expect when you have a team like G2 coming in, adding firepower, and in a honeymoon period. Um, I think that Mongols showed well. Like they showed they could play. They didn't do bad. G2 just happened to be the better team during that series, and they won the long battle with both these maps going into, well, one map going into overtime, one map going the full distance. Um, but that wasn't too surprising. Them curb stomping MIBR is unfortunate for MIBR. I think they played a total of 9 rounds this entire tournament, which is really unfortunate when you gotta take like a 20-hour flight into a country to play a tournament. But I'm not gonna say it wasn't expected. Um, then, as we talked about, Mongols M80, it was a game. Mongols did show that they were the better team. It wasn't anything too crazy though. It was 13-8. Not the furthest, not the closest. It was a game. The most interesting was the Nuke matchup versus Furia. I think nobody really expected Furia to make it all the way to the last round of the lower bracket. And their game versus Mongols, I doubt anybody was really expecting Furia to beat them. But Furia looked good. Um, you know, I like to shit on Caserado for re-signing to Furia for all these times, but this lineup with Skulls looked a lot more comfortable. They seemed to be in high spirits, and they did show pretty well against the Mongols here. Mongols not having their best individual performances, nothing super crazy bad, but you know, Furia did just look like the better team in this game specifically. Um, Again, Mongols not playing bad, but they did lose, and personally, I was surprised to see them bomb out this early. I suppose they didn't bomb out; they did make it all the way to the last round before playoffs, but you know, them coming into this tournament, they play a lot more of the lower tier tournaments as well. They're going to have plenty of time to regroup, bounce back for Cologne, obviously for the major that's at the end of the season. I think they're playing in the tournament coming up tomorrow, the Sky Esports one, um, which is like Mongols, Bleed. I think Aurora might be there. It's a lot of tier two teams, but Mongols definitely will bounce back. This isn't the end of the world for them. Would have been nice to see them do a little bit better, but what are you gonna do? And to continue with the team that beat the Mongols, Furia, they started the tournament losing to Navi. I think this was expected for everyone. They did look good on the Nuke game. Nuke seems to be a really comfortable map for this iteration of Furia. It was always a good map for Furia, but they were able to take the 13-11 to the eventual winners. The Mirage match, a little bit worse for Wear, but like I said, I don't think many people were really expecting Fury to win, no matter how high you rate Navi, because there's a lot of Navi haters. I think they were the favorites going into this matchup, and it wasn't anything special. Um, their lower bracket run was quite fun though. Them, beating FlyQuest pretty heavy-handedly, I think is no small task. FlyQuest obviously not being the best team in the world by any means, but they have proven to be a team that can compete at the top level. They always have close series for the most part. Their phase series that was in the first round, they went to overtime on Anubis, and then they lost at full time regulation on Nuke. So they are a team that can fight. With that being said, they did not fight very hard against Furia. Furia kind of just walloped them. Um, it looked good. FlyQuest did not play their best Counter-Strike. I think this matchup, it could have went 50-50 looking at it. I probably would have given the slight edge to FlyQuest. It's totally not biased, I swear. But yeah, no, Furia looked good, and then they got to go to the second round against Sashi, which that new game was insane. They had a lead, and Sashi just slowly started chipping away at it. And honestly, Sashi should have won. So the game should have been 13-11, but I believe it was Cello had this crazy op clutch where he was waiting on top of heaven while the bomb was planted on A site, and he dropped down from heaven and just got two kills out of nowhere and defused the bomb with like zero point 0.1 seconds left on it. Crazy round, but that definitely, without that round, without that crazy situation happening, they would have lost that game. I think it does show good resiliency for them to then be able to go into overtime and still win it. But, on paper, it wasn't the best matchup. Sashi looking, punching way above their weight there. But they were able to win, and they were able to go against the Mongols, as we said, have that pretty good game on Nuke. And then going into playoffs, they were playing one of the favorites for the tournament. I would say probably the second highest rated favorite for the tournament, Mouse, where they did lose at 2-1. It was a pretty okay series coming out of Furia. I think them making it this far in the tournament is a huge win for them. No matter what, I think they're gonna ride this momentum, and they may not be at the level where they think they can compete for trophies, but they may be at the level where they know they can improve, and they know that the overall atmosphere in the team is a lot better. Skulls is an upgrade, whether or not he's, the highest fragging player on the team. He's an upgrade from Key, who they had before, who was not ready to play in the big leagues. And speaking of Skulls, he seemed a lot happier on Furia compared to the train wreck that was Team Liquid. But yeah, so that was Fury's tournament, and now I want to head over to Team Spirit. Team Spirit probably being the first favorite everyone had going to this tournament, ending the season with a win in Blast. And going into this tournament, I think people were going to think they were going to carry a lot of momentum. They also are Team Spirit, having one of the best rosters in the world right now. First series against MIBR, they did exactly what you expected them to. They stomped them. Not much to really talk about. They looked good. Magic's had a great series. It was exactly what you expected. Then, going into the first round of playoffs, they had to face the new G2, which everyone was hyping up because it was going to be Monacy versus Donk. And unfortunately for Spirit fans and Donk himself, he did not have a great game. Um, I don't think it's anything to worry about. I think this team needs to lose some tournaments in order to build character and be able to get better and better and better. You got to remember, Donk's a 17-year-old kid. This team is very young, and without the hardships of losing, they won't have the motivation to keep winning. So I don't think it's anything to fear. I think G2 beating them is crazy. I didn't expect G2 to win this series, but I don't think anyone should worry about Team Spirit. I think honestly, by the time Cologne comes around, they're going to be firing just as hard as they were before. They're definitely going to be prepping, and then this tournament was just a little bit of a setback for them. Side note, I just want to mention this tournament bracket style. I think it's weird. I'm not a fan of it. I don't like how you can win your opening round matchup and then go straight into playoffs and then lose in playoffs and only play 2 games this entire tournament and then go home. I think it's weird. I also think the whole last chance qualifier with one team in it is just a weird choice. I'm not too sure what the rest of EWC was looking like for the other teams, or for the other games, excuse me. So I don't know if the tournament styles were similar for the other games, but this is weird, and I hope this doesn't continue because I just think this whole bracket system is messed up. And the BO1s for the last chance. Again, I understand that they're on a time limit because they have to run 15 different game tournaments, but just weird choices. So next up, I want to talk about Team Vitality, who has been struggling as of late. I think that's pretty clear to see. They're not looking the best. They're obviously still one of the best teams in the world. No one can take that away from them, but things just have been looking a bit shaky over in the Vitality camp. They started with a 2-0 against M80, as we already touched on. Vertigo game was a lot closer than it should have been for Team Vitality standards, but Dust 2 game, they they killed them. I think you can go into Vertigo and saying this is the first game of the new season against a team you don't really know much about with a new player, not really sure what's going to happen. It's understandable. They won the series. That's all that really matters. It was a 2-0, brought them straight to playoffs. And then in playoffs, they went up against Virtus Pro, who I don't want to say Vitality should have won this game because that makes it sound like Virtus Pro is not, a competitive team, but when you look at it on paper, Vitality should have won this game. I think Virtus Pro was playing good, but not necessarily good enough to the point where they should have beaten Vitality. I think they kind of fell apart during this series. Going double overtime in the first triple overtime in the first map of the series, winning that, um, and then losing the next 2 games on maps that you're pretty comfortable on. Um, Against a lesser opponent, it did kind of seem like to me that Vitality's minds weren't in the right place for the tournament. Um, it, I'm not the biggest Vitality fan. I'm gonna be honest. I don't want to say they're overhyped because they are obviously one of the best teams in the world, but I think this team is kind of lacking something. I don't want to blame the addition of Mezzi for it because I think Mezzi's actually been, you know, doing decent for his role. He's not the most consistent, as you can see here. He only had a 7-3 in this game, but he's doing what was needed for the team. Um, but I do think it might be time to switch some things around in the roster because it seems like if everybody in this team isn't firing at all cylinders, they just aren't really contenders to win. That's just my opinion. Might be a little bit of a hot take, but that's just how it looks to me. I think that they need to get more consistent firepower. Flames have been great. Spinks, not too hot on him right now. Apex, I think he's a very good IGL. Um, I think he is starting to sort of get figured out right now. Also, Vitality not having a dedicated opper does affect this team. Obviously, Zywoo being one of the best players in the world, still top three without a doubt in the race for this year. This team without an op, just I don't know if they could do it. And if Zywoo wants to play the rifle and the op, I think that's great. But I think it does damage the team a decent bit. That's just my opinion. I don't want to get nobody mad. I know people love Vitality, but I'm shooting it how it is, brother. But yeah, probably shouldn't have lost that series. They did. It's the start of the season. It's nothing to get too concerned about, but I do think it might be time to start considering some avenues for that team. I'm just a dude. What do I know? FaZe is the next team up, and FaZe, we're not looking too hot this tournament. They played against FlyQuest in the first game of the tournament, and FlyQuest, as I said, I think are a good team. They're a competitive team, but they're not a team that should bring you to your limits when you're FaZe. Um, 16-13 on Anubis. Anubis being FlyQuest, one of FlyQuest's best map, and them being very capable of being competitive on that map. I understand the nuke matchup. I think FaZe really should have kind of killed FlyQuest here. They got the win at the end of the day, and that's all that matters. But it's just not looking the best for FaZe. Then when we go into playoffs, FaZe Navi in the first series. Honestly, I don't blame them for losing to Navi. Navi had a great tournament, and they also kept both these maps close. I think the biggest problem right now is the lack of enthusiasm from FaZe. I know they probably want to try to not get burnt out very fast, especially with Rops repeatedly saying like he's very upset about the state of the game, and I think you can see that in his play style. He doesn't seem like he's having fun. He almost seems like he's forcing himself to play these games, which not only will decrease his performance now, if he's forcing himself to play this game now, the risk of burnout is going to just get exponentially worse the further on the season goes. I think for FaZe, this isn't the end of the world. Again, first season or first game of the season, all that shit again. But I also think that FaZe will bounce back. I think Rops will get better, get in a better state of mind about the game. Um, Brokey was playing well this tournament. Frozen and Rain both were fine this tournament. I think they just need to get back on the right mindset about playing again and hopefully get a little bit happier with the state of the game. Whether or not there's updates, who knows? We don't know anything that Valve is going to do. All we can do is hope. But I don't think this is the end of the world. I think that give it another 2 or 3 tournaments, FaZe will probably be right back where you expect them to be. Um, yeah. Next up, I want to talk about the finalist of the tournament, G2. G2 coming into this tournament, no one knew what to expect. Having Snacks come in instead of Hooksy, I think for sure is a firepower upgrade. We don't know in terms of calling how much of an improvement that's going to be. I think, as I said before, definitely a vibe improvement for sure. And Malbs replacing Nexa is just a good play. Whether or not Malbs has to replace his roles and Hunter's been switching around too a little bit, it's definitely a better lineup in terms of firepower at the least. Um, First game, as we talked about before, against Mongols, it makes sense for them to win. Honeymoon, good spirits, firepower addition. Um, Good CT sides, very aggressive, proactive CT sides. I know that first map on Ancient, Malbs did seem a little bit weary about maybe not having the best timings for when he was trying to go for those flanks or get aggressive into A main, but they played the series well, and it was good overall. And then map two on Inferno, good game overall. Inferno does it seems to be, and it was stated by Snacks that he's not the most comfortable playing on Inferno yet. So we're probably going to see Inferno slide down that map pool for G2, but they were still serviceable on it. They were able to get the win. Wasn't the most cohesion we saw of G2 in general, but it was good enough. And yeah, overall, the players you expected to play good played good. Snacks didn't look terrible. Um, Probably the same performance you'd expect out of Hooksy for this first series. But again, attitude and the additional mobs just made this team better than where they left off. Now going into playoffs, we already talked about the Donk Monacy matchup, which turned out just being pretty mid overall for both players. Um, but G2 looked good. They were able to whittle down Spirit, um, play Counter Strike that got Spirit in uncomfortable positions for sure. I also think that there might have been a little bit of pressure getting to Spirit, coming into this tournament, especially after losing the last one, wanting to start the season off good. Expensive tournament, really important for organizations there. I'm not sure if Spirit has teams in other esports that were competing at the other tournaments, but it's still a very important tournament. And I think a combination of Snax' new style of calling for G2 and the pressure did get to Spirit. But G2 looked pretty good. They were able to outlast Spirit, and doing that to the best team in the world right now is nothing to sneeze at all. Then game two, I think that G2 should have beat VP here. As I stated before, VP looked good, but they weren't playing the best. Their wins were definitely aided by Complexity and Vitality both being off this tournament. And I think G2 was just a team that was firing correctly on the day that they had the matchup, and they did kind of roll over VP a little bit. VP definitely didn't look super comfortable during this series. Nico went ballistic. Everyone on G2's side honestly had a very good series against VP, and yeah, I think it was pretty expected, especially if you were, watching the Vitality and Complexity games. As I said, VP not a bad team at all, but they did get pretty lucky to get into the semifinals because both of the teams they faced were just not having a good tournament. And then before I get into the grand finals, I just want to touch on Navi's run. As stated before, playing Furia, expected nothing special here. Bit had a great tournament in general, had a great series right here, starting the tournament off with a 1.71 for the series. Uh, Outstanding things by him. I think FaZe being in the condition that they're in right now did play a pretty big role in Navi beating them. Um, and let me say this first. I don't believe in fluke victories. I think that term is kind of dumb. Um, I do believe that maybe a team shouldn't have won something when it's on paper, but when you're in a tournament and there's teams playing and some teams peak at the right time, some teams fall off at the right time, some teams throughout the tournament slowly, get beaten down and whittled down, and some teams just stay at a more consistent level. I don't think you can count a team as winning by fluke when they go through the full tournament and win their games and then win the trophy. Like when Navi won the major, sure. Should they have? On paper, probably not. Going into that tournament, there was teams way above them that should have won instead of them. And no one's doubting that. Mavs, Spirit, G2, just to name a few. But they did. They won the battle, they fought harder, and they won. So I think saying anything is a fluke is complete blasphemy. That's just my opinion. I know I get shit on for it a lot. That's just how I feel. With that being said, on paper, FaZe should have beat Navi. But as we talked about before, FaZe just not looking the best right now, especially with Rops's decrease in performance, and Navi was able to just secure the win. It was a pretty close series. Mirage and Nuke, it was good out of Navi. Bit again performing very well, but they were able to just whittle down FaZe to a point where they were the better team. Next, oops, sorry about that. Next series against Mouse. Um, Coming back from losing 13-1 on map 1 and then dominating the next two maps, the wins weren't as destructive as a 13-1 victory, but 13-8, 13-5 against the team that has been showing to be very, very good and a contender for every trophy, especially when you're a team that is considered more of a dark horse, is very impressive. Wonderful having a great series. This and even Immo looking pretty good. He's been getting a lot of criticism. He's definitely had a recent uptick in performance ever since the major, when he got a lot of shit for playing a lot of the star roles with the not best performance behind them. But I think he proved his worth in this series, along with Wonderful, who's continued to be one of the best upcoming oppers in the world right now. Um, I put him in the same conversation, not the same conversation, but I put him up in the conversation for best opera in the world right now. m0NESY is by far, I think, the best player in the world. Um, Even without this series against Donk during this tournament, I think m0NESY is the best player. He's the best. He's the better understanding for the game compared to Donk. He's also way more versatile than Donk. But Wonderful is, in that tier below that. And Navi showed to be very destructive in this series. Coming into it, another matchup that I don't think people think that Navi was going to win, but they showed to be the better team, way more resilient than Mouse, and were able to steal that. And now, head into the grand final. Um, it was a closer grand final. Um, I think that the main problem for G2 was not really having their key players show up. But with that being said, Navi had their players show up. Alexi B not only had a great individual performance during most of this tournament, honestly, and this series, but he was able to provide the masterclass behind the game that we know him for. He was able to outsmart G2, especially with Snacks being a little bit newer, and with that third map being Inferno, where Snacks said he was not very comfortable as the caller. It was shown that Navi was the better team, and I think that going into this matchup, Navi was the better team either way. I think that G2 winning this tournament would kind of been a pipe dream. They did look great. They looked way better than we were expecting them to, but at the end of the day, Navi is a roster that's been around. They just won the major. They just made the finals at a blast before the season ended. They're a team that, although people hate on them and may not respect them and think that they're one of the best teams in the world, they are good and they will prove themselves to you. But at the end of the day, like I said, Navi the better team, Bit winning the finals, and I think that both Navi and G2 uh, benefit a lot from this tournament. G2 have a solid starting point, excuse me, for this team to continue to grow, for Snacks to get more comfortable in their role, and for Mobs and Hunter to try to figure out how their roles are going to be affected CT and T side as they kind of trade off what roles who's playing. And Navi solidify that they are a team that can contend. They may not always be the team that makes the finals, but they are a team that you need to watch going into a tournament, because if they turn up, they will be a force to be reckoned with. And I hope that after this tournament, people can kind of acknowledge that and not just count them out as soon as they start because their players might not look like the best. They are a team that you need to be worried about. And I hopefully this tournament proves that. So anyone who did stick around until the end, thank you very much for watching. This is something new I want to try to do. I'm very passionate about Counter-Strike as a video game and Counter-Strike as an esport, and I just want to try to get my opinion and voice out. Whether or not people give a shit, I don't know. I'm doing this for me to have some fun. But if you guys do have any suggestions on how I can maybe make this better, if I should be a little more in depth instead of the more casual take I took this time, um, let me know. I didn't go into specific rounds too much or really into minute details about specific games. I just gave an overview of the tournament because I feel it's a little more digestible. But if you guys would like to see any other sort of breakdown analysis from me, I would love to do so if you just let me know. But I do appreciate you guys watching very much, and I want to try to continue this for most of the Tier 1 tournaments that will be coming up for this season. With that being said, hope you all have a great day, and goodbye.